Mist from My Morning Jacket. That's Squid Ink. Great new record. If you haven't heard it yet, check that out. It came out a couple weeks ago. Kev on the Radio is back for an exclusive interview. I'm just waiting for the thumbs up from my producer to make sure we are live and kicking, and we are. Andrew Aust is here. Andrew, nice to have you. I've been endorsing you for a couple months now on the radio. I haven't formally met you, so it's nice to finally be face-to-face with you.
It's great to meet you, too.
Thanks for coming back. Insurance agent with Comparion Insurance Agency. How long have you been in the insurance game?
So insurance is fairly new to me. I've only been doing it for about a year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is it a passion of yours, or is the passion come more guiding people through what can be a mess of the insurance world?
That's a great question. I think it is a passion of mine because I get to help people and guide them through, the unknowns and get to educate them on things that are maybe frustrating to them.
Yeah. And insurance is one of those things you have to.
Yep.
in case stuff happens. And a lot of people just pay for it, no questions asked, when there should be probably plenty of questions being asked because you're paying somebody.
Sure.
As far as you've only been in it for a year, how has insurance been changing recently in your short-time experience?
Insurance keeps you on your toes. Insurance changes all the time, especially in a brokerage. We're reviewing, state of the state and reports daily, a little bit, and doing a deep dive weekly. In terms of big changes in Colorado, there's some legislation out there that's trying to help with some of the rules and tools that they use to mitigate risk for wildfire, which is great. That's a huge win. That conversation needs to happen in Colorado as well as other states. So I'm glad we're having it.
As far as prevention.
Yep.
And
prevention, and also just kind of modeling tools to assess risk, so that they're not improperly saying, "Oh, you can't be insured here because you live right here." They're trying to bring in other factors to help assess that risk, which is good for both sides, right? That's good for the insurer and good for the insured. It gives some responsibility to both parties, and I think that's a great thing.
And I suppose politics plays a part in that as well, as far as, California, the devastation that happened out there recently. Politics played a role in that, as far as not cleaning up brush, as far as defunding and whatnot.
Yeah, I think, and I don't know a ton about that and how that interaction happens, but yes, I think that there's definitely conversations that need to be had about what does cause these things and how can we, prevent these things from happening. Yeah. And I think that conversation can be had on a lot of different levels. Each state is regulated by a Department of Insurance. And so rules are going to differ from state to state. I'm certainly not an expert in, other states. But, we have to follow the rules that we have here, and it's, that's where we need to go if we want to make changes. We need to look at the Department of Insurance and see what they're doing and pay attention to it.
Yeah, that's important. We've had so many fires here as well. Yeah. You're a Colorado native, aren't you?
I am.
Excellent.
Yeah.
What's your background? How did you get involved in insurance?
Yeah, my background is in small business, and I would say my entry into insurance was a little bit serendipitous. I maybe had some reservations about whether I wanted to do this, but it's been a great journey since I started. I've always been interested in helping people and consulting with people, and a lot of the businesses I've been involved in have had that component, and I think that's what drives me. That's what feeds my passion in this industry too. Is just the ability to educate and help people.
Yeah. I'm certainly one of those that would need that. We were talking off air about Comparion. They've only been around maybe about 2 years, or?
Yeah, the model's been around for about 2.5 years. Yep. Yeah.
And the approach is not just selling insurance, but kind of guiding you through other companies, you're finding the right fit from the right company.
Absolutely. And that's the great thing about a brokerage, is that we do have a lot of options. Product A is going to be great for one client and maybe horrible for another client. And
Right.
having product B, C, D, E, and F, and so on and so forth is a great tool to have.
So how do you help compare different insurance companies, providers?
So the way I like to do it is I really like to have kind of just a conversation with people and just to see where they're at, see what their situation is, see what their assets are, see what their goals are, and try to place them appropriately. To give you an example of that, I had a customer the other day, and they were having some issues with their auto insurance because one of their kids had a little bit of a lead foot, and had quite a few tickets and a couple of accidents, and that was causing their rates to go way up, and ultimately causing them to not qualify for some insurance carriers. And so I had a conversation with them, and we ended up taking the approach of putting most of their family in one package policy, their home and auto, with one insurer, and then I peeled off one of their kids and put him on a different policy, just to try to help with rates and eligibility. And that's one of the things I love about being able to have those options is sometimes, that's necessary. Sometimes if you don't do that, then you're going to, the whole family's gonna have to settle for something that they may not want because of one person. And I'm not trying to single out anyone. We all have, I've had my share of tickets in the past and whatnot.
Of course.
But that's why those tools are there, so we can help navigate those situations.
So it's like an insurance score. It's kind of like a credit score.
Yep. Yeah, it is. Your insurance score is kind of like your credit score for insurance. So there's a bunch of different contributing factors to that. Some that you can't control, and others that you have a little bit more control over. So. Yeah.
As far as what is an insurance score and how?
Sure.
Well, how can someone maintain a good one?
Right.
Other than lifting keeping control of that lead foot and whatnot.
That is one way that you can help control it. But there's a lot of different things you can do, and that's a great question. I think that one of the things that I always do as an agent is I try to talk to my clients about some of the do's and don'ts. To give you a good example. If you're not sure you need to file a claim, don't call an 800 number, call me, because I can help, figure out if that makes sense. Sometimes what happens is, customers will say, oh, it hailed, I'm going to call my insurance company and see if I need to file a claim, right? Well, if they call them and it turns out that, they don't need to file a claim, they still effectively did file a claim, and it's called a $0 claim. And it doesn't seem really fair, but that is one of the things that will affect your insurance score. And so I always tell people, but before you call them, let's talk about it. Let's talk through this. Maybe let's get a professional out there. That's where we'd use a resource. We've got some great roofers we work with that are willing to just go out and assess something, and they'll be able to give a professional opinion as to what makes the most sense. And that way you can keep those zero claims off of your record. Credit score plays a little bit of a role in your insurance score, but it is not the only factor at all.
I was going to ask you that next.
Yeah.
How does that affect coverage or a premium?
It's going to affect it a little bit. Insurance is, the definition of insurance is transferring risk from one party to another, in its purest form, or, often it's said transferring risk of one to many. And so we're always analyzing risk. That's what insurance is about. So there's a ton of different factors that come into play there. but it's not, it's a small piece of the whole. So it's not, if someone maybe doesn't have perfect credit, it doesn't mean that they shouldn't, shop for insurance or be scared to shop for insurance. It's just one factor out of many.
Yeah. And you hear a lot about bundling these days. Do you recommend personally bundling with one insurance company?
I think that depends, and that's another thing that I would make a recommendation on a case by case basis.
Exactly, it's kind of a personal thing.
Yeah,
Someone's got a boat. Some
Right.
other people don't have boats.
Right,
So-
right. And sometimes it makes a ton of sense to bundle, and sometimes it doesn't. Again, going back to that customer, that makes sense to quote unquote unbundle. There's the art of the unbundle too.
Okay, so what's a situation where you wouldn't recommend bundling?
Sure. A good example of that, another example of that would be say you have an RV and your home and your auto. There are carriers that do a tremendous job insuring recreational vehicles, and there's also a benefit. Some carriers for comprehensive claims don't report to the reporting agencies on recreational vehicles, so you don't have you're not going to affect your insurance score if you have a claim on, say, an RV. So that would be one instance where it made sense to unbundle, right? Keep your RV on a separate specialty policy, keep your home and auto on another policy. Another example of that is, and this seems kind of crazy to think about a bicycle being insured, but there's insurance for bicycles and e-bikes.
Yeah.
And you can certainly insure those products on your home policy. But part of the problem with doing that is that generally, at least in most cases through my advice, a home policy deductible is pretty high. And if you have an e-bike that maybe is worth $7,500 on a home policy where your deductible is $5,000, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to put that on that policy for a variety of reasons. For one, you're out $5,000 if you have to file a claim.
Right.
That claim's going to go onto your home policy and affect your insurance score. Whereas if you had that peeled off on a rec line policy by itself, maybe you have a $500 deductible and you file a claim for that, that doesn't affect your insurance score, might not, depending on your carrier. And it's just a better fit. Yeah.
Do you have a lot of e-bike claims?
Not a lot. I am trying to break into that market a little bit more,
I love the
though.
whole concept of the e-bike. I want a bicycle, but I don't want to pedal it.
Yeah, I know. Right.
But they have come a long way. They are some nice e-bikes out there, so I can see why you would want to insure one.
Sure. Yeah.
And if you're a renter, can you cover that? Is that covered under renter's insurance?
Yeah,
An e-bike.
You certainly could cover that under renter's insurance. Again, that's probably situational, whether you'd put that on your renter's policy or you'd put that on a separate policy, but certainly, yeah.
Well, speaking of renter's insurance, what are some of the requirements there?
So for renter's insurance, that's going to be case by case depending on where you live. A lot of the big companies, the big high rises, say in downtown Denver, are going to require a renter's policy. Now, that policy is really to protect their interest, right? It's not necessarily intended. Their requirement is to protect their interest, not necessarily to protect the renter's interest. I talk about renter's insurance with a lot of people. I think it's something that you really should have, and you shouldn't have it to protect just someone else. You should have it to protect yourself too. So there's a couple different components of renter's insurance, kind of like there is with homeowner's insurance. There's a liability coverage component, and then there's a property coverage component. Generally, if you're insuring through requirement, you're really just getting liability coverage to protect, your landlord's property. On the flip side of that, I think that it's a great thing for landlords to require that, just because that takes some of that liability risk off of them. Whereas if they didn't have that, they'd be holding all of that risk, and it would be covered under their insurance.
Yeah, so therefore, does a landlord's insurance cover tenant-related issues?
It would if it had to. And it's kind of like, it's kind of like they're going to go to point A first and then they're going to go to point B. So say, for instance, there was a claim that was the fault of the tenant, right? But that tenant didn't have insurance. Well, then they have to hunt for who does have insurance. So that would default to the landlord.
Right.
The flip side of that is that that's going to cover the landlord's interest, but the landlord's not necessarily going to cover the tenant's personal property if it was their fault.
Of course not. Yeah.
Right. So there's lots of different reasons why it's a good idea to have those kind of things.
And do you steer more towards auto, home, or are you just kind of in all of it?
A lot of our business is auto and home. I like to do some of the more unique cases too. I love insuring recreational vehicles. I love talking to people about things that they might not know about. But I would say the majority of our business is kind of geared towards home and auto
Just
insurance.
kind of the common man.
Yeah.
Do you work with businesses as well?
We do. So we have a commercial division that we work pretty closely with. Locally, we don't write commercial insurance start to finish, but I have contacts in our commercial division where we will write. I will say that the other component of that, not to go off on a tangent, but
Go ahead.
I also really believe in good referral partners, and so I'm always of the mind if I can't help someone in what situation, I'm going to have someone in my pocket that I can send them to. The worst thing for me that I want to do is say I can't help you. Good luck, right? I never want to do that. So, in terms of business insurance, if we can write it, we're generally very competitive. But if we can't, I have some great partners that I can send people to that I know will take care of them. So.
And you just mentioned you like some of the unusual claims. Do you have any stories you want to share?
Well, I don't know if I like unusual claims,
Anything
but
crazy happened in these RVs?
Well, there are some stories out there. I off the top of my head, I can't think of anything that's nutty right now. But there's certainly some weird things that happen in the insurance world. I really, one of the reasons why I like kind of some of the maybe the more products that are unknown is because they are unknown and people, maybe aren't protecting things correctly. And we've got lots of products that can help them do that. Going back to that education component, you want to protect your assets correctly.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of different ways to insure things, and they all work to a point, but some of them work a lot better than other ones. So specific coverages, specific lines are going to be, just give people a better peace of mind. You were talking about insurance is something we have to have.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. And I think that to a point creates a problem because people kind of are resigned to just say, okay, I'm just going to do this because someone told me I had to do it. Right. And yet, yes, there are, in a lot of cases you do have to insure, right? Well, if your home's paid off, you don't. You can self-insure. Do I recommend that? No, not usually. But in most cases, yes, you have to insure to help, secure a loan on, a vehicle or a home. And again, if the tone of that or the thinking of that is, well, I'm just going to do the cheapest thing I can to protect myself because someone told me I had to do it, you're really losing out on some of the benefits you could gain from getting the right type of coverage. Renter's insurance is, again, a perfect example of that. I'm just going to get a liability policy because they told me I have to. Why not protect your personal property too?
Is that kind of the common mistake people make with insurance? It's just getting liability.
I think to a point it is, or people will just say, well, I'm just going to get what they told me I have to have and not think about it. I'm just going to kind of, bite the bullet and and just do it because someone told me I had to. And I think that that's the wrong way to look at it. You know, we need to educate people more.
Right.
We need to be more consultative. And that's really what we're here to do.
And that's where Andrew Aust comes in. He's a great guide with that. Again, if you're just joining us, we are here with Andrew Aust, insurance agent with Comparion Insurance Agency. I'm learning a lot because I am kind of that person. It's like, well, I was. Just pay for it because you have to, instead of looking at all the options. And how much can we rely on certain things that pop up that say you're paying way too much for insurance? We got this guy's bill down from $160 to $19. Is there any clout to these ads?
You're talking about some of the ads that you see on
The Instagram or
Instagram
pop
or,
up on your computer or whatnot.
Yep.
Is that just bait?
I honestly, I can't speak to that completely. I would say that I'm probably 99% sure that a lot of that is clickbait.
Mm-hmm.
You get mailers saying, hey, we can insure your home for as little as this much. Well, in most cases, I've never heard of anyone that's called back and actually gotten that rate,
Yeah.
right? Or if you do get that rate, what are you actually getting?
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. I'm not sure I want that.
Right. And, there are ways to strip a policy down completely and give someone the bare minimum requirements, There's something called force-placed insurance, that say if you don't have insurance or your insurance lapse, the bank will put on what's called force-placed insurance. And you'll pay for it, and it will be of almost no benefit to you. It will be of the benefit to the bank, right? So I think that, even with inexpensive policies, especially in Colorado, that word is pretty relative. Even inexpensive policies are not inexpensive, right? And I always say that, cheap insurance is great until you have to use it, and then you find out what it covers or doesn't rather.
Cover. Yeah.
And, I'm not here to tell someone that, they shouldn't explore any of those things, but that's the key, right? Explore them, educate yourself,
Yeah.
figure out what you're getting, and if you don't want to do that yourself, which, that's why I'm here, to help navigate that with you, help advise you. I'm about building client relationships. I'm not about, just a customer that, just an order taker.
Selling
Yeah.
insurance. It's
Yeah.
about
It's really
teaching
about
it.
teaching and building relationships.
Yeah, that goes a long way. Can changes always be made to insurance policies? You're not always locked in.
You're not locked in. Depending on what kind of changes you want to make within a specific policy, there are going to be some restrictions. A good example is, say someone has a motorcycle that they only take out on the weekends, right? I don't know of a policy where you can, say, turn off your collision coverage every time you're not using
right.
it. With that said, there are policies where you can do that seasonally, So if you have an RV, say, again, going back to that, and it's stored for 7 months of the year, you can generally turn off your collision coverage when it's parked and just keep it, covered from, wind and hail and things like that while it's parked and not have that collision coverage and turn it back on. So there are ways to change those things. The other thing that you can do is you don't have to wait until your policy ends to cancel your policy. You're not bound to premium that you don't use, and that's a law. So that's statewide. Someone can't say, well, you paid for this policy and it lasts till August, whether you like it or not. That's not how it works. They're required to give you a refund. So if you want to move, you can move at any point.
And we're talking about out-of-state effects. You don't know a whole ton about it, but how do out-of-state circumstances affect Colorado insurance rates?
Yeah. So when we're talking about assessing risk, and we're talking about things that maybe happen in California, or maybe happen in Washington, or maybe happen in Florida. Those are not going to have as much of an effect on us as things that happened in Colorado will. Kind of the theory behind insurance is they're going to look at your immediate pool first, and they're going to it's going to kind of go out from there, right? And so the things that are closest to us are going to affect us the most, but there is still potentially some effect to things that are far away. Insurance companies, as a model, have to be able to, be able to pay out claims kind of at a moment's notice, right? And so if you've got an insurance company that is nationwide, they have to be able to, they have a fiduciary responsibility to be liquid, right, to an extent. Mm-hmm. And so they have to calculate, that's part of the calculation of risk, right? They have to manage that, and they have to manage their funds so that they can do that. And so out-of-state events can affect, rates in Colorado to a point. They shouldn't affect rates in Colorado as much as events in Colorado will affect them.
Right.
But, yeah.
And what sort of a circumstance would affect that? Like wildfires?
Wildfires, and that's, that's an interesting point. There's a House bill that's in the works. I'm not sure if it's completely passed or in effect, but
yeah, you mentioned this earlier.
Yeah, and it's just talking about how we can be more intelligent about how we assess risk, right? And so, that's the counterpart to, okay, we have this risk. We know we have this risk. How can we combat this intelligently instead of just saying, nope, we're not writing anything here, right? And there's lots of different ways to do that. But, again, going back to that, those conversations are important to have. Those, those things are good things for us to talk about.
There's so many insurance companies. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's like any other industry, I guess. Right. But of course, insurance, especially lately, certainly not the most trusted
sure.
Thing out there, especially with the murder last year, that Mangione guy. I mean, is there a level of? I'm sure there has been, but is it the government that keeps an eye on these insurance companies as far as corruption and whatnot? And is it a corrupt government looking at keeping an eye on these corrupt insurance agencies?
Big questions.
How do you decide?
But yeah, it's a good question. It's a big question. I don't know if I can answer that, fully. But what I can say is, insurance. At least, the insurance that I provide, property and what's called property and casualty insurance. So for your physical
I was talking
possessions
health about that. Yeah.
Right. Those are regulated on a state level. And so they are regulated by the government. The government is going to put, rules in place that say that, you have to be fair to a point, right? And some states are more strict than other states are. California is really, really strict about that. And that, not to get into too much of it, but that's one of the reasons you saw some insurance companies kind of moving out of California, because California said, you cannot charge more premium for this, right? Well, they were looking at their risk pool and say, well, we either have to or we have to not insure here because we're bleeding, right? And so those things are good, but they also have to be managed from both sides, right? And that's why, it's important to have those conversations. It's important to have those debates, about, what is appropriate and why do we need this? I think that, if someone says, well, we need to do this just because, that's not good enough, right? There has to be reasons, and there has to be rules, to govern those things. And so I think it's an ongoing, conversation that always needs to happen, and And when that stops happening, that's a bad thing. We just need to keep those conversations going to,
Yeah.
to make sure everything is kind of where it is, because things change all the time. We can't predict when the next wildfire is going to be.
Tornado.
Tornado,
anything like
hailstorm. I mean, we have to control the controllables, right?
that.
And manage risk that way.
So is it required in these certain states, like if you live in Tornado Alley or Canada, or not necessarily Canada, but anywhere wildfires break out continuously, like every single summer? Are you forced, not forced, but are you required to have fire insurance? Are you required to have flood insurance?
So that's going to be case by case. Flood insurance is not required here
Right,
in
because we
Colorado.
don't get a lot.
Right. It's a good question. In terms of fire insurance, the requirement for insurance is really going to be more based on, your additional interests, right? So again, if you own your house outright and you don't want to have insurance, you don't have to. You can do what's called self-insuring if you want to. I mean, you have to think about,
Well, what's that? How do you self-insure yourself?
well, you have a big bank account.
Okay. Well, you have that much money, you don't have to worry about insurance.
Right. And there are some situations where that makes sense. I was part of a park district board for a while, and there was a piece of property that it just did not make financial sense to insure it completely. It was partially insured, but the rest was taken on by, it was a community thing, so it was taken on by dues and fees, and there was a slush fund that was created to help mitigate some of that, because you have to do, whenever you're talking about insurance, you have to do a cost analysis, and that doesn't just mean doing a cost analysis on whether to have or not have insurance. It's a cost analysis on what kind of insurance makes sense too. And that's, again, another component of that education that we need to talk to people about. Does it make sense to have deductible A, or does it make more sense to have deductible B and save money on your premium, right?
Yeah.
We just have to, we have to kind of drill into those things individually. And I think that to me is really key. It is really an individual thing, right?
It really is.
And some person A's situation is most likely completely different than person B's. So,
And you mentioned you liked the RV insurance for some reason.
Yeah.
Let's get back into that. What do you
Sure.
like? What do you like so much about RV insurance?
well, I think that RVs and boats and things like that are products that people have that. I'm trying to remember the statistic on RVs, but I heard a statistic on boats. There's a higher percentage than we'd like to think about of boats out there that don't have any insurance on them, right?
Really?
Because it's not, again, if the regulations for boat insurance aren't probably as strict or probably not as enforced as they are on, say, car insurance, right? So if someone buys a boat outright, say someone buys an old beater houseboat, and I'm sorry, I'm veering away from RVs, but
That's okay.
I just wanted to use this as an example.
It's a recreational vehicle.
It's a recreational vehicle. Say someone has a houseboat, and they say, well, I bought this for next to nothing, or it was inherited, I didn't pay
Yeah.
anything for it, so I'm not going to insure it. Well, what happens when you have 16 people on that houseboat? Someone gets drunk and falls off and drowns. Where's the liability fall on that? That falls on the
Out of
owner of the
your pocket.
houseboat.
Yeah.
So that's a huge liability, right? So that's a component of insurance that not everyone thinks about. It's like, well,
Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
yeah. Well, so there's a lot of I like those things because I think that the insurance products for those things are underutilized, and they're not that expensive either. You can insure an RV and have great coverage for not that much money, and it's such a good peace of mind to do that.
In your 1 year of insurance, what has been, I don't know, I know you like to educate people. That's the most important. That's where the passion comes. What's the other favorite part of your job?
I think just kind of being involved in the community, meeting people, feeling like I can be a resource to the community. I think that's huge for me. I think that we all we all need to work on being more friendly with each other,
Yeah.
being better citizens to each other, and I think that that's a way that maybe I can give something back, and that's important to me.
Yeah, and even just being more personable.
Yeah.
I think we've lost a lot of that in this age of staring at our pocketbox
Right.
and whatnot.
Indeed.
I lost my train of thought. I had a question. Oh well. Yeah, lost it. But that is important for people like you to be out there, because insurance is something, like we mentioned, a lot of us just go into blindly. We call the 800 number. We go through the menu, and we finally get someone to talk to, and still don't get that far. So I mean, that's a good thing about Comparion. You got the personal lines, and that's important. It goes a long way. So many people, even if you're in retail or I don't know, just out walking around in public, people are just kind of out of it.
Right.
They're like walking, crossing the street, looking at their phone. That personability has just kind of it's gone down
Yeah.
the wayside, and it's important for companies,
It
like
is.
insurance companies, and to just get what you want. It's important. It's your life.
It is. Yeah, it's protecting, some of the most important purchases you make, right? I mean, not many people make a bigger purchase in their life than their home, right? And want to make sure that that's protected.
Yeah.
And then the other side of that too is letting people know that we are out there to help them, that we are out there to consult with them. We don't just want to take their money and run, right? We want to make sure they feel good about what they're doing. They feel educated about what they are doing, because I mean, it's cliche, but knowledge is power, and it's really true.
Well, yeah, that's in anything. The biggest mistake is being uneducated about something.
Right.
Going into it, what safety measures can lower premiums with auto policies and home policies as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's lots of things that again get left out that there can be discounts for. I was actually just talking to Josh and Sarah on the last interview about that, about when should you review your insurance. And
Yeah.
I like to say you should do an insurance review annually, and not be afraid to do it. Not be afraid that you're going to be pitched something just because you're talking to someone. It really is important to make sure that that your coverages are up to date. And the other side of that is, review it once a year unless you make a big change, right? Say you replace your roof, right? That's a perfect time to call your insurance company. And I know I probably said that verbatim last time, but there's lots of discounts that can be had from having a new roof. In Colorado, you're probably putting on a hail-resistant roof, or maybe you're upgrading to a concrete tile roof. You can get great discounts for doing things like that.
And that's great, because that's a big job. That's an expensive.
Yeah,
It's an expensive thing, getting a new roof.
It
and
is.
especially if it happens within twice. I think I heard or read a story, or it was probably just a commercial for a roofing company, that some guy had to replace his roof twice in like 5 years because of hail.
yeah,
So I'm sure the second time he got the the hail-proof roof, but
Right.
that's no joke. I mean, it's a lot of money, and that premium, that stings too sometimes.
it does. Yeah, I mean, I'm a consumer too, and I mean, I got my renewal, and it stung a bit, this last year. So I think that there is value to talking to someone, and a good agent's going to ask you when you do a review, hey, has anything changed? Right? Do you have Have you made any improvements to your house? Did you get a new car? I mean, if you got a new car, it's probably on your policy, but I hope so.
Well, yeah, but what else do we look at for a review?
So, you can look at, say
Changes to your house.
changes to your house, improvements. Maybe you got a new furnace, right? That's another discount item. You get a new HVAC system. Maybe you got new windows, right? That's another discount. All of those things, because you've got to think about it. All of those things help mitigate risk for an insurance company, right? If you've got old windows that are potentially leaky, that's a risk for the insurance company. And so, yeah, they're going to reward you if you put in brand new windows that are, weather sealed versus your 20-year-old aluminum windows, right? So all of those things are, can be a benefit to you. If you spent the money, generally the way I look at it on a home at least is if you spent a decent amount of money improving something in your home, it's worth talking to your insurance company. Now, you're probably not going to get a discount for putting new carpet in your house, but
Okay.
well,
Good to know. I
yeah.
wouldn't have known that.
Sure.
Windows make sense.
Yeah.
Remodel makes sense, but
Yeah. But yeah, those are always just good kind of pieces to note. The other thing is you want to make sure that you have enough coverage, right? And so generally, when you're doing things like that to your house, you're increasing the value of your home, right? And so you want to make sure that your coverage matches the value.
yeah. Well, I've learned a lot in the last 45 minutes, I've got to tell you. I mean, yeah, again, like I said, it's always been something you just, all right, well, it's time to pay your insurance again.
Yeah.
I haven't reviewed mine in ages.
Sure.
But I'm not a homeowner. I do rent. But at the same time, I shall look into that. It's good to know. What's next for Andrew Aust and Comparion Insurance?
I think what's next is just kind of continuing what we're doing, just trying to get out there in the community, educate more people, collaborate with more people. There's so many great, individuals and businesses in our community, and, being able to connect with those people is a great ththing.
Yeah. Do you work with a lot of small businesses too?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or is it probably more small businesses than large ones, yeah?
Yeah, I would say so. And it's interesting, because obviously Liberty Mutual, who owns Comparion, is huge, right?
Yeah.
But they've really done an amazing job with their brokerage model. They really are gearing us to work like small businesses, right? And they give us a lot of free rein to do that. They want us to be out there in the community. They want us to, kind of create our own models, so that we can connect with the people in our communities.
Yeah.
So it was a pleasant surprise. I'll say that.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
That's for the for the consumer. That's good news too.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, what have we not covered?
Let's see.
Anything
Well, I've got some useless facts I could
Let's
talk
have
about.
it. I love useless information.
All right.
I'm full of it.
So Kevin, tell me what you think. When do you think insurance started? When do you think the first instance of insurance was?
Well, I know the answer because we talked about this off the air. But I would have guessed maybe mid-1800s.
Right. It's crazy how long it's been around. 1750 BC.
Okay.
That's crazy.
Please expand on that again.
Yeah. So
17. Say that again.
It's 1750 BC. So
Wow.
is the sixth king of Babylon wrote a code on a stone tablet called the Code of, I'm going to butcher it, but it's the Code of Hammurabi. And part of that code included something that was, a way to basically insure shipments and travel for goods. Back then, a lot of people, I guess we still do today, but that was, you had to take goods from different places, right? And so there was something that was called a bottomry, which has now kind of been the term now, and this is outdated today, but a bottomry bond, and basically it was an agreement where a captain of a ship or an owner of a ship was able to secure a loan, against their ship, right, and to be able to have funds to buy goods and labor to carry those goods and sell them in another place, and that was insured by the vessel itself. The vessel came back, and they had proceeds from that. They would pay off, that loan with interest. But if the vessel sank or was stolen, the loan would be forgiven. So that was kind of the first instance of insurance, way back, when things were written on stone tablets, if you can believe that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Where'd you learn that?
I'm kind of a sucker for just weird, obscure information.
Yeah. You probably just looked it up at
Yep,
one point.
yep.
What was the first insurance claim?
Right. And so, and that's, I think that was brought into, that idea was brought into kind of the modern world of insurance back in the 17th century in London. There was a coffee shop called Edward Lloyd's Coffee House, which kind of did the same thing. It was merchants and business people that got together and talked business there, and they would insure shipments in the same way, with collateral, with the vessel being the collateral. And interestingly enough, Edward Lloyd's Coffee House in London kind of morphed into what's now Lloyd's of London, which is huge. It's a reinsurer and a marketplace that's used worldwide. So it's pretty fascinating to think about kind of the origins of where these things came from.
So that's probably the first insurance company.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Or is there one that stands out that you know of?
No, I mean, Lloyd's of London is the one that's notable to me. I can't verify that. I don't know if that was the first, but it's fascinating to think about that.
That's interesting. I've always heard of it. I never really knew what it was.
Right. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, we got an insurance lesson and a history lesson today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's going on this summer?
Just trying to enjoy the summer,
Yeah.
Get over to the pool a little bit. Colorado's beautiful in the summer. Trying to get out there. I like to hike.
Yeah.
So trying to get some hikes in.
Well, don't do it tomorrow.
Yeah, right.
Triple jit, yuck. I like summer too, but 100 that's pushing it for me.
Yeah, I agree.
What is in the future for you? You plan on you like it at Comparion? You want to stick with them?
I do. Yeah, I think it's a really great model. I think that I don't have any big change plans. Just kind of trying to immerse myself further into the community. I think that there's so many people that are passionate about businesses and ventures here, and I just being able to learn more about those things, be involved with them, be involved in local community, local government, I think is great. We all play a role in making our communities better, right? We all do, and I think we all have a responsibility to do that, and and being nice to people is one of the best ways to do that.
Goes a long way.
Yeah.
Any events that you guys hold to get yourself out there and really get personal?
Yeah, we participate in some events. And I wish I had the details. There's event in Inglewood. I'm part of the Inglewood Chamber.
Okay.
They do, I believe it's the first week of August.
I've got the website up here. Would it be on there somewhere?
I'm not sure if it's up there yet. It's the Broadway Block Party, and they close off a couple blocks of Broadway for, I think it's either 1 day or 2 days, and they have it's like 7,000 to 10,000 people that come through there, and there's a bunch of local vendors. I think we're going to probably try to do that, and sponsored some fundraising events for some community resources. There's I think we've got another event coming up that I'm going to do with the community ministry. They're a food pantry, and in South Denver, and they provide service for the underserved community. There's another event, I believe in July. I should have been more prepared, with another nonprofit called Bridge House, who serves the homeless population. I'd love to get more involved with them. Those are both amazing entities. So, yeah.
Well, good. Well, like I said, I'm finally glad to meet you in person.
Likewise. Yeah.
I've been, like I said, endorsing you for a couple months here. I've never had a put a face to the name, so it's good to do that, and it's great to have you here. Any last words before we wrap it up here?
I would just say, don't be afraid to call your insurance agent, and if you don't have one, find one and call them.
Exactly. Stay away from that 800 number.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with the 800 number used correctly.
Right.
I'll say it that way.
But that's where you come in. You got to tell us. You got to
Right.
teach us how to
Right. Exactly.
navigate that 800 number.
And yeah, don't be afraid to get your insurance reviewed. I review insurance for people all the time, and it's not. You don't have to feel like you're going to be sold if you talk to someone. I really am passionate about just making sure people don't have gaps in their coverages.
Yeah.
So just give a call.
Yeah. So people really get anxious about that, reviewing it.
Well, I mean, I think that unfortunately, I mean, it is sales, and I think that there's different ways of being a salesperson, and some people are resistant to that. Kind of the same way that maybe some people are resistant to go buy a car because they don't want to feel like they're being pushed into something.
Right.
But again, it's these stigmas come from, generally, in my experience, a very small percentage of the population, and they're not representative of everyone. So
Right.
yeah.
Okay, excellent. Well, thanks again for being there. Again, Andrew Aust with Comparion Insurance Agency. You can call him at 303-723-0367. That's Andrew Aust at 303-723-0367. You can also find Comparion Insurance at comparioninsurance.com. Andrew, thank you again very much for being here. You're always welcome back. I think we'll see you again next month.
Yeah, I think so.
Good. We'll get a fresh update and hopefully another history lesson.
I'll try.
That was interesting. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
All right. We will get back to our regularly scheduled programming on K4CO Radio.